The TRS-80 Color Computer 3 was the last in the line of the color computers, and it added quite a bit of capability. But is it capable of running decent arcade/console ports? We're going to find out today on the Retro Hack Shack. Well, hi everybody, my name's Aaron. Welcome back to the channel. As you may have noticed, this is a little bit goofy looking because I'm actually emulating myself sitting out in the garage for a couple of reasons. One reason is that I had some hand surgery done, and don't have to worry, this is going to heal. I've had this done before. Longtime viewers of the channel will recognize some of my scar tissue and some of the close-ups that I've had. Basically, in a nutshell, I have a condition called trigger finger, and this is exacerbated by the fact that I'm a type 1 diabetic. And so I've had to have a number of surgeries. This is actually my fourth and fifth finger that I've had operated on. What happens is your finger kind of locks up in a particular position when you try to open it. There's some resistance there, and then eventually it goes bling and opens up. And what happens is there's a shaft here that the tendon goes through, and for whatever reason, there's some obstruction there where the tendon doesn't move properly through that sheath or shaft inside your hand here. And there's a couple of things you can do about it. You can take cortisone shots, which sometimes works, but in more severe cases like mine, they have to go in and operate. And so, like I said, I've had 5 of these done now. I'll probably have to have the other 5 fingers done at some point. So this is not the last you will see of me wearing some bandage on my hand as I recover from hand surgery. So I've had to improvise on this episode a bit. Also, I've been under the weather, so I haven't really felt up to putting any episodes together. And as a result, I ended up missing the September or Septandy time period to put out a Tandy episode. But I didn't want to let that slow me down. So I decided to go ahead and create a Septandy or Octandy, in this case, video of some games that I found in my collection for the TRS-80 Color Computer 3 some time ago, and I sat down at the old ping pong table to record me playing those games and kind of get a feel for what the TRS-80 Color Computer 3 is actually capable of. So for reference, I grew up with a Color Computer 1. It was the first personal computer I ever owned, and so I was used to playing games like this, Dino Wars, 4-color graphics, really chunky, and still fun to play, especially as a kid playing with dinosaurs on your computer. But yeah, graphics were not so great on the Coco 1 and 2. So today I'm going to be reviewing 3 games that were made for the Color Computer 3. The first one we'll look at is Rampage. You'll remember this one, of course. It was very popular in the arcades. Then we'll take a look at Predator, which was a little bit of a different port. And finally, we'll wrap up with Robocop, that famous movie that was also converted into both arcade games and console games after the movie was released. So without further ado, let's get started taking a look at these games. Now, before we get into the games, I just want to take a second to thank the sponsor of this episode, PCBWay. PCBWay offers inexpensive PCB manufacturing and a whole lot more. Need assembly services? No problem. They can do front side, back side, through-hole components, you name it. They also offer 3D printing, CNC milling, and more. So check out PCBWay for your next project, and I thank them for their support of the Retro Hack Shack. So here's the setup I'll be using. Of course, I'll be using the Color Computer 3, which has 128K of RAM standard, although I've upgraded this model. And it also has the ability to increase the speed of the processor on demand, and it has RGB output. So they've increased the color palettes, the number of colors, as well as the resolutions that are capable. So I'm sure some of these games will take advantage of at least the increase in RAM. I'll also be using the appropriate monitor for the Color Computer 3, which is the Tandy CM8. It's the RGB monitor that was built for the Color Computer 3. And I'll be outputting the video as well to the RGB to HDMI. I did a video on how to attach this and what kind of output you could get from the Color Computer 3, and I'll link that video up above if you want to watch that. I'm going to be using the deluxe joystick for this setup. It's a really nice joystick. It actually allows you, it's a self-centering joystick, but it allows you to turn the self-centering off with the switches on the bottom. It also has some trimmer sliders on the X and Y axes, so you can really get the joystick centered up exactly how you want it. And it has 2 buttons for some games that require 2 buttons instead of just 1. And now let's take a look at our first game, Rampage. Now, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the arcade version of this game. It is quite the classic and a lot of fun to play with 3 people. So before we look at the game, let's take a look at the manual, and then we'll see how this color computer port stacks up to the actual arcade game. So here's the cover of the manual, and you can see that the graphics that they use are vaguely reminiscent of the graphics on the arcade game. And even though this particular game was written or put out by Activision, it was actually written there, you can see at the top, by SRB Software. More about that in a minute. One of the things that's really cool about this port of Rampage is they kept the 3-player action. So you have 2 joysticks, but you're also able to play a 3rd player on the keyboard. And you can see they actually do use both joystick buttons, which is great. So one joystick button actually does the punching, and the other joystick button you use for jumping. So I'm going to be doing a little split screen here so you can see the screen better, and you can see the first thing that it asked was whether I was using an RGB monitor or not. And now we can see where that SRB software comes into play. This game was written by Steve Bork, so I'm guessing he used his initials to create his company. And right away when the game starts, you hear that familiar sound, just the way the arcade started, with the little headlines there. And here we go. So I started as the wolf guy. I mean, the resolution's not great, but actually it plays pretty good. Almost exactly like the arcade game. You can even punch the cars that come by, you can punch the helicopters that are going by, you can eat things out of the building. I found it a little bit hard to get up on the edge of the building though, so you may have to be a little bit careful there as you're doing that. You're a little bit more precise than with the arcade game. But yeah, otherwise it actually plays really, really well. And one other really cool thing that Steve Bork put into the game is that you can actually join the game at any time using a second joystick or the keyboard just by hitting the jump button. And it'll actually add one of the other characters into the game that you can play. Now I did notice that the more sprites and things that are on the screen here, the slower the game actually ran. So you can see my character is actually going kind of slow here. So for 3 players, it might be a little monotonous over time, but this was a really fun port, a really great game to play, and I'm really impressed with how it plays on the TRS-80 Color Computer 3. Alright, so next up we have Predator. Now Predator had a little trouble here trying to get the cartridge to run because, there we go, it actually had some dirty contacts that I had to clean up. So this game is not actually based on an arcade game. You may remember Alien vs. Predator, which came out in the arcade a little bit later on, but this is based on the console version of the game, which is based on the movie. First, this came out for the Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, and Amstrad, and then later for other consoles like the NES, even computers like the Atari ST and Amiga, and finally for the Color Computer 3 in 1989. And this is another Activision game, and it was programmed for the Color Computer 3 by Greg Zumwalt. This game also takes advantage of both joystick buttons, so one joystick button actually makes your character jump, and the other one makes him punch or shoot. And I must say they spared no expense at the opening screen here. It looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger is losing his mind over how good this game port is going to be. So yeah, this game is kind of a classic side-scroller where you have to get weapons and defeat enemies, and there's kind of a puzzle. Like you can see there's a gun up there that I can't get without making my way through the kind of maze here that's going on. And characters shoot at you and you need to either punch them or eventually shoot at them with the gun. And it can be a little frustrating. I will say it took me quite a long time to get used to the controls and what can kill you and what can't kill you, what can hurt you, how much damage you can take. You see you have a life bar up there at the top that kind of measures how much more damage you can take before you die. But yeah, otherwise it's pretty good. You can tell that this is definitely based off the console. If you compare the TRS-80 Color Computer 3 version with the NES version, you can see they tried to emulate it as much as possible. And they did a pretty good job. This game is very hard. It took me forever, even just to get the first gun over here to navigate all the obstacles and get it. Once I did get the gun, it made the level quite a bit easier, but still was not a cakewalk. This is a tough game, so if you want a challenge and you're looking for a fun game to play on the Coco 3, I highly recommend Predator. Just give it some time and take your time. You'll be able to get through these levels eventually. Okay, and last but not least today we have Robocop. It's a great arcade game. Let's see how it stacks up on the TRS-80 Color Computer 3. Now you might remember the Robocop arcade version looked a little something like this. And the NES version looked like this. So after taking a look at the manual, you'll be able to compare the TRS-80 Color Computer 3 version and see which one it matches up to. Unlike the other two manuals we looked at, this one pulls everything right from the movie, including the iconic Robocop font and an actual screenshot from the movie. Now, this game was put out by Data East, but look who's back programming this. It's our friend Greg Zumwalt from the Predator game. Now this game, again, does use both buttons, one for punching and one for firing weapons. They do try to emulate the directional shooting that they had in the original arcade game, but you can also play with the keyboard if you don't have a joystick. The manual also does a good job of explaining the display indicator that's on the screen because it does have kind of a complicated display, and so it's good to know what's going on before you start the game. And speaking of starting the game, let's go ahead and fire this up on the Coco 3. So here we go, some really nice opening graphics here, Data East and Robocop. Yeah, not bad. So we've got some Robocop graphics with the blinking visor. Yeah, so let's get into this. You can see that the graphics leave a little to be desired, but we are working with a system that came out in 1980, the original system, with some minor upgrades along the way. So we can't complain too much, but all the elements are there. The guns, the pickups, the display indicator at the bottom, the punching, directional shooting. Really, all in all, I can't complain too much at the graphics because they were able to work in, or Greg was able to work in, all the elements that you would expect from a Robocop game. And it does mirror up to the console port, obviously, much more than it does the actual arcade version. But yeah, it's actually not that bad. Even the stairs and having to go up and down the stairs like you would classically in a Double Dragon sort of game. Yeah, it just works for a side scroller, and it's really kind of fun to play. After a while, I got several different weapons and I could switch back and forth between them, which took a little bit to figure out. But once I did, I had lots of weapons with lots of ammo and was able to get pretty far in the game, I think, for my first try. I don't know if this is considered the second level or what, but I actually made it this far and was pretty proud of my progress. All right, so there's 3 great games you can play on the TRS-80 Color Computer 3 based on either arcade games or ports from console games, depending on how you want to look at it. But 3 great games, all really fun to play. I bet you're asking which one is my favorite, or if you're not, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use that setup to tell you. My favorite actually was the first one, Rampage. It's simple, it works. The other 2 games were a little bit clunky in that you you had to be able to master the controls a little bit better. And Rampage was just simple, smash 'em up fun, and it gets bonus points for being able to play 3 players on a home computer, which not too many games support. So I would say definitely look at Rampage if you don't have it in your collection, but the other 2 games are just as fun. Predator's really challenging, and Robocop just brings back a lot of memories of me playing that in the pizza parlor, waiting for them to warm up my slice after school. So yeah, a lot of great memories there as well. And by the way, maybe you've noticed I'm wearing a different shirt, and it's the shirt that I created. It's available on the Retro Hack Shack shop. Just go to retrohackshack.com/shop. You can find this shirt there, which is a TRS-80 home screen, the boot up screen when you first start the computer. And then what I did was I added a little LED because the TRS-80 color computer always had this flashing color cursor. And so I just added this little LED with a little battery. And yeah, it makes for a fun little party shirt. So you can get one on the website, as I said before, in the shop. Just go out and look. And I've got other shirts there, merch, I guess, as they call it these days. So check out the shop, not just for products like the RGB to HDMI, but also fun t-shirts that I make for myself and then just post up there in case anybody's interested. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a shorter one and a different one because I am indisposed and really busy and haven't been able to put out videos. So I'll get another one out soon, I promise, as soon as my hand starts to feel better. Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Patrons receive ad-free and early access to content after the episode commentary, and of course, your name in the credits. If you liked that episode, here's a few more you might enjoy, and I thank you for your support.
End of line.